Do you often feel overwhelmed by your disorganized notes, or do you have to constantly interrupt your creative flow just to write down a few things? In these situations, wouldn't it be amazing if you had a tool that would allow you to easily capture your thoughts, transcribe them, summarize them, and even tag them according to your acknowledgement system? Well, the future of note-taking is here, and you're about to be a part of it. With nothing more than your iPhone, you will be able to revolutionize your productivity, streamline your note-taking process, and save a ton of time along the way. So get ready, because today you're getting a real competitive edge when it comes to note-taking. Here's how ChatGPT can take over note-taking for you, fully automated and tailored to your specific needs. Best of all, it takes less than 20 minutes to set everything up. Before we dive in, let's take a quick look at the whole setup. For our tech stack, we need 3 things. First, Apple's Shortcuts. That's a native built-in automation tool right on every iPhone or Mac. Second, Notion, our acknowledgement tool of choice, although you could swap it out for pretty much any note-taking tool with an API. And third, OpenAI, which will do all the heavy lifting that is required from the AI side. And here's how the whole process will work. Our final shortcut will be fairly straightforward. We will start a Siri shortcut. We will then input a note, and Siri will transcribe our spoken voice into text. We then take from Notion, where we store the tags for our knowledge management system. We will query all these tags so that we know, okay, these are the topics that we usually talk about. And then we will send both the transcript and the tags together to OpenAI. And OpenAI will then read through the transcript and summarize it, and also will be tasked with picking the tag that fits best. And with this information, it will send it back to our shortcut, and we then add this information to Notion, right? So we pick the corresponding tag from our database and we enter all the entries so that we then have this perfect setup where we can just talk through something and get a summary of our note together with the correct tags. Now, before we get to building, let's have a quick demo. Hey Siri, new note.
What is your note about?
AI note-taking tool.
What's the note?
With this new AI note-taking tool, you can simply talk through your ideas or thoughts. Everything will be transcribed, then summarized, and then even tagged according to your acknowledgement system, so you can save a ton of time.
One moment.
That's pretty cool, right? So let's have a look how you can build this. Let's get started by building the backend for our note-taking system in Notion. Again, you could use any other sort of note-taking tool that allows for a similar structure and has an API, but Notion is free to use, it's super simple, so this is the one that we're going for. And all you need here are basically 2 databases, one for your notes and one for your tags. So to get started, we just type /database, and this will create a new inline database. And this one we can call notes, and we want to have one property for the name of the note and then another one for the actual transcript. So this will store what we talk into Siri. And then we can duplicate this property to create another field for the summary, so the AI generated summary. That's basically it for notes. And for tags, we do the same thing again. We press /database. We call this tags. We have again a name for the tag. And then here we want a relation, because we want a connection between the notes and the tag. So we call this notes. Go to edit property and pick the relation type. And then we pick our other database up here. And this will create the relation between both of them. We call this tag. And then we add it. And now you see we have this connection on both pages. And if we have an entry here, a note, and if we have a tag here, a tag, then you can now very easily connect it and see, okay, well, this tag belongs to this note, or the other way around. Now, in order to finalize the setup, let's just remove the entries here, because we're going to add them through our integration in a moment. And then we add some tags. And this really comes down to what you want to take notes on, right? So this you would fill out before you start using the integration with the topics that you're interested in. So in my case, I will add productivity, gardening, and cooking, and then another placeholder tag called note tag. And this one is necessary because sometimes OpenAI might not properly recognize what a note is about, or you might dictate a note for a topic that isn't in your interests yet, right? It's a new thing. So in this case, it will then select the new tag option and note tag option, and you can go later in and manually see, well, okay, this note, that's actually this topic, or I now need to create a new tag for next time. But yeah, that's basically it for the Notion backend setup. All that's left to do is to create an integration with Notion that allows us to update these properties. To create an integration, head over to notion.so/myintegrations, and this will open up this page. On my page, you can see I already have a bunch of integrations. Yours is probably empty, but don't worry, I'm going to walk you step by step through creating your own one. It's actually super simple. All you need to do is click on New Integration and then pick the workspace that you want to create it in. So in my case, I don't want to have it in my main workspace. I want to have it in my sandbox, and then give it a name. So this one will be AI Notes for YouTube. You could upload a logo, but that's not really necessary. So just click on Submit and it will create this new integration. Most importantly is this thing, the secret. This is the token that we will use later on in our shortcut to tell Notion, well, hey, it's me, I'm allowed to make changes to this page. So what you want to do is you want to click on Show and then on Copy this code and then store it securely for a later step. But before we do that, we need to give the integration now access to the specific page in our Notion workspace so that Notion knows, okay, whoever has this token is allowed to make changes to this page in Notion. To set up the integration, all you need to do is go back to Notion and then click on the 3 dots in the top right corner. And then scroll down to the bottom where it says Add Connection. And as you can see here, already I have AI Notes for YouTube. So I click on it and it will ask me, do I really want to give it access to this page and everything inside? And I say yes. Now, when you do the same, it might initially not show up because sometimes Notion takes a few moments for the integration to load. So best thing to do is to either refresh the page if you work in the browser or to close Notion and reopen it if you work on the desktop app. And then it should be there and visible. So now we have our integration set up, we have our backend set up, and we can jump into creating the actual shortcut. If you get stuck somewhere, don't worry. Down below in the description, I've linked the blog post with the step-by-step instructions. So if you need any more details or so, go there, have a look. On that page, you can also download the template. So with one click, you can get the full shortcut. You just need to make a few adjustments and then you have it up and running. And last but not least, you can of course always ask me any questions in the comments. So to build your shortcut, open up the Shortcuts app on your Mac or on your iPhone. I prefer working on the Mac because I just have a bit more screen real estate, but if you only have an iPhone, it just works the same there. So open it up and then hit the plus button to create a new shortcut. And I'm going to drag the editing field in here, and the first thing you want to do is name the shortcut. Now, naming with the shortcut isn't just about some organizational thing so that you recognize, okay, that's what the shortcut does. It's also how you trigger the shortcut when you talk to Siri later. So make sure that you do something that is fairly natural, right? So think of it, okay, so you say, hey Siri, and then followed by whatever the shortcut name is, right? So in this case, it could be create a new note. Okay, so that's our name. And then, we can realign it a bit, and then we can start building the individual steps. To make things easier, I've broken down the build of the shortcut in 4 different steps. First, we're going to build the part that retrieves the tags from Notion. So we will see whatever tags we have in our tags database, and we can use that then in the next steps to inform decisions. Second, we're going to build the prompt together with the API command for OpenAI that does the whole AI summary and tag choosing. Third, we're going to work on how to get the response from OpenAI and put everything into Notion so that we can actually save all the information. And then at the very end, we build the actual beginning of the shortcut where we have our manual input, right? So where you can talk into Siri and we'll transcribe it and input it. And the way we do it like this is that it makes it a lot easier to debug, right? If there are like things going wrong, if every time you have to take out your phone and say something into Siri or type something in, that's a bit annoying. So this way it's just a bit faster. So first, how to get our tags into the shortcut. We do this using the get content module, and this get contents of URL module in a shortcut is basically an HTTP request, so we can send a request to any API. Now, what we need to know is the correct URL for that API. In my case, I already looked it up from the Notion documentation, and it's this one, https://api.notion.com/v1/databases. And then we have this very long sequence of random numbers and letters, and then /query. Now, first of all, you can find this URL in the blog post that's linked in the description, so you can just copy paste it from there. But the important thing to know is that this part, this is the database ID that you want to query, so from where you want to read data. And this will depend on you, so everyone has to swap this out for their own unique database ID. The rest of the URL is the same, but this one you need to adapt. How do you find your database ID? Well, it couldn't be simpler. You go to your Notion workspace, and then, because we have an inline database here, you need to first click on the 6 dots and say open as a page. And then you can click on the three dots in the top right corner and say copy link. Now that link, you can go to any text editor or your browser and just paste it in. And you see now the long URL, and after your workspace name, so the lab playground, that's the name of my workspace, you see again one of these sequences, and you want to copy it until the question mark, right? So between the slash and the question mark, that's your database ID. So I copy this, I go back here, and now I will replace this part between the two slashes with the other information. And that's the URL that we want to query. Now click on Show More, and now we can change the method. We need to change this to a post method, and then we need to include some headers. And the headers are basically the access information. So you think of this as sending a request to Notion servers, and then you need to prove to Notion servers that A, you know what you're doing, and B, that you are allowed to do what you're doing. So we need to add two headers here, one for authorization and one to show Notion which version of the API we want to use. To do so, click on the plus button and then click in here and call this one authorization, capital with a Z. And then in the value, you want to type in bearer, capital, and then one space, and then you want to paste in whatever it is that you got as a secret from the Notion integration page. So remember, we were on My Integrations. We have the secret here. I'm going to show it now, and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to delete this afterwards, so no need to try doing something with it. And then you can go back in here and paste it in here. Hit enter, and even though it doesn't show it now here, you see if I click back inside and then go to the side a few times, my secret is now in here. So that's what we need to do to authorize us to Notion. And then second, we need to add another one for the Notion version. And this one will be also capital Notion and version also capital with a hyphen in between. And for the value, it is 2022 and then hyphen 06 hyphen 28. That's it. With this setup, we should now be able to query our database and get information from Notion about the entries in our database. Just realized this is actually the wrong database ID. I put the one in from the notes one. We of course want to query the information from the tags database. So in my case, I need to change this to the tags database. And if you build this yourself, make sure that you get the correct ID. So this is the one for the actual tag database. And then you can click on the run icon to see whether everything works. So let's click on here, and ideally we should get a response back. And great. This looks right, even though it looks a bit confusing, but don't worry, this is a JSON object and it contains all the information about the database that we created in Notion. Kind of hard to read like this, but we can actually copy it and put it in a JSON beautifier if we wanted to see it. But for this purpose, we don't need to because we know exactly what we're looking for. But if you see, like it's very small in here, but you see, for example, content productivity, right? This is one of our tags. And with this one, we can then now extract information from here and work with it for the rest of our shortcut. To extract the information from this very long and confusing piece of text, we can go here and we can first say get dictionary. And we want to get the dictionary from the input. So we put it, drag it here below, and we'll automatically now create a dictionary based from this result. And after that, we want to get a specific value from this. So we want to again say get value, get dictionary value, and we drag it in here. And we say now, okay, which value do we want to get? And I know how it's structured, so I can just type it in. I want to get the value for the results in this dictionary. After that, we then, if we run this now, right, we could run it again, and we see now, instead of getting the whole object, we get now a much smaller object back. And we get actually 4 different ones back, and each of them has a different entry, so one for every property. In this case, the first one is, of course, where is it? Should have somewhere productivity, and then we have our other ones in the other fields. Here we have cooking, right? We have gardening, we have productivity, and we have no tag. Great. So we managed to narrow it a bit down, and now we can extract the individual pieces. Because it's 4 different entries, we want to loop over them. So we'll say for each, and then repeat with each. We put it down here, and now we have this loop in between. Everything in between will execute as many times as we have entries in here. So what do we want here? We want a text because we want to build this list of tags that we have. So we take the text property, we put it inside, and then we say, well, what should it give us? We want tag name, and then we want ID. Now we need to tell Notion, of course, how to get this, we need to tell Shortcuts how to get these things. So what we can type in is we can type repeat item, and this will pull up this information. We click on that, and then we can double click on repeat item, and we can say that we want to not just get anything, but we want to get information from the dictionary. So we go on type text, and we switch this to dictionary. And now we can put in a path for this one. So you can think of a JSON object as this nested thing with a lot of different entries, and we can tell it to go down a route and look up a specific value. So in this case, our path will be small properties dot capital name dot title dot one dot plain underscore text. If that's confusing, because it is. And don't worry, again, you can find these things to copy paste with a blog post in the link in the description. Just trust me on this one, it will give us the correct result. Hit enter, and you see now we have this properties.name.title in here. And for ID, we do something similar. We say again, repeat item. And in this case, we don't need to go so nested, luckily. So all we need to do is go to dictionary. And then in this case, we just want the value for the ID. Really, really important that you spell it correctly and that you have the correct capitalization, right? It's case sensitive. So now let's check whether this works. We need one last step to check this. We say combine text down below here, and we want to combine our repeat results with new lines. So after every line, a new one of these, and then we can run it and see whether it hopefully works or whether we made a typo somewhere. Perfect, that looks great. As you can see, we have now tag name, node tag, and the corresponding database ID in our Notion workspace: productivity, cooking, and gardening. With the first part done, let's now build a second part where we create our prompt for OpenAI and then send an API request to OpenAI to ask it to summarize our note and pick the tag that fits it. And to do so, let's get a new text element below here. And this is where we're going to build our prompt. Now you could of course build it directly in the module, but in particular with a long prompt like this one, it's a lot easier to have a separate text field where you can do the edits. And I already written a prompt, so I'm going to go and add this in, and then we go through the individual steps and I explain to you why I do it like this and what you can do if you want to modify it. So first things first, we're setting the context. So we tell OpenAI that it's an expert personal assistant who assists us with our personal knowledge management. We will give it a specific note, and it should then summarize this note as concise as possible. Now, as concise as possible is not very precise. So this is something where you could go in and add more individual context, right? So for example, if you wanted to always create a summary with 5 sentences, or if you want a specific format, or you want it to focus on specific things, here's where you can go in and give these additional instructions. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to leave it as this, which means we have probably a lot more variety when it comes to summaries. But again, for this one, it works. And if you want to do something more specific, go in and modify it here. We also tell it that it will get a list of tags, and it should review these tags and then pick the one that fits best. And if it doesn't find anything, it should pick the no tag one. Now, the next part is very important, and it's probably even more important than the exact way we phrase the context. And that is that we will tell OpenAI to answer in a very specific format, because we need to take the answer and process it further. So it's very important that it always answers in a specific way. That's why we tell it, please first write out a summary and then use 3 hashtags as a separator and then add the ID of the tag that you picked. Then we give it even some examples to make sure it really understands how we should do it, right? So your summary, 3 hashtags ID, and then all the rest is just reinforcing this. And then at the end, we say, this is the note, the input, and this is the tag for the combined text. Now, we don't have the input yet, but we have it for the tag. So we can replace this text already with the input, and to do so, we remove it. And then we do a right click here. And then we say insert variable, select variable, and then we can select the combined text. So this will take this list of text that we have from here that we query from Notion, and it will input it and combine it into our prompt. And for the provided input, we will do something like that later once we get our actual input. For now, we just take some placeholder text. So let's go ahead and just take maybe this introduction to a blog post that I've written about Scrintal, and this is the note that will summarize, but again, you could just put in any placeholder text here. But this looks good. This is our prompt, and now it's time to build the actual API request for OpenAI. You already know the drill for this one. We use the get contents of URL module. We add it to the bottom of our shortcut. And then we want not the content of text, but we want the content of the OpenAI URL. So we clear this. And then we paste in this URL. And the URL for OpenAI is a bit different than the one for the Notion API. It's api.openai.com/v1/chat/completions. Again, everything in the blog post in the description if you want to copy paste it. We open it up and we switch it again to a post request, and then we will set our headers. The headers here are similar but different. We also need an authorization header, so we click on plus and we go in here and we will call this again authorization, and again it will be bearer authorization. So that means we need to type bearer and then space and then the value from our OpenAI API key. How do you get the API key for OpenAI? Well, you go to OpenAI, you sign up for an account, and then when you're signed into OpenAI, you see this page, and then you can click on Personal, and then on View API Keys, and then here you can create a new secret key. Now, very, very important, when you create your secret key here, and it shows it to you, make sure to copy it and save it, because unlike with Notion where you can go back and look at it later, you won't be able to do that here. So if you forget to save the key now, you would need to delete it and recreate it. So go through these steps and then go back to your shortcut, type in bearer and then the API key, and then paste it in here. Next, we need to add a second header, and this one is for the date format. So this one is content type, both capital, and then for the value, it's both small, application/JSON. And then for the request body, we need to add some information, unlike with the Notion API. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to tell the model that we're going to use. So we click on plus and we type in for the key value model, we leave text, and then the model that we're going to use here is GPT/3.5/turbo. That's the current fastest and best model. It might change later on, then you can replace this with a different one, but for now, this is what we go for. We need to add the actual content for it. So we click again on plus. We're going to call this messages. And this one will be, instead of a text, it will be an array. And this means that we can now open up this messages one, and then we can click on it. And now with it highlighted and this expanded, we can click on plus, and this will create a new entry nested below. So you see, if I close this now, it's gone. So that means it's nested in here. And we have our item here. We have one item, and we need to create actually a second item, so we can do that already. And both of these items will be dictionaries. So I switch from item 1 here to the dictionary, and then I open it up again. And again, I click on here and on plus, and I create another nested item, double check that it's nested inside. Great. Now, the one element in here will be the role, and it's the role system. And this sets another system prompt for ChatGPT. So it doesn't have much to do with our actual question to it. It's just a preparation. So we click on item 1 again, another plus, and a second one next to the role, the content. And this content is sort of a meta prompt, right? This is the main prompt for what it's actually supposed to do, and the meta prompt sort of primes the system for what's to come. So in this case, we have a general one. You're just a very helpful personal assistant that assists us with our questions, right? You can play around a bit with it. Right now in GPT 3.5, the system prompt is not the most important one. It's really just like setting the stage for the rest. This one is a lot more important. But minor changes in here will have also minor effects on the output. So this is the first part. Item 1, we just set the system prompt, and now in item 2, we set the main prompt. So again, we change this to a dictionary. We open it up, click on plus, and here again we have a role and we have content. The role in this case is the user, and this includes now the question from the user. We click again, click on content, and here in the text we now insert our prompt. So alternatively to writing it here, right, you could write a whole prompt down here, which is not as nice. That's why we do it up here. We right click it, we say insert variable, select variable, and then we take this text variable from up here. Oops, now it looks like it crashed a bit, so I'm going to reload it, and then everything should be in here. Here we go. So again, just to summarize, we have our headers that tell OpenAI, well, we are allowed to make this request, and then we have the actual content of the request in the body. We first specify the model, and then the message setup tells OpenAI first, okay, this is the settings in which you should answer, and this is the actual question. And this item 2 with role user, that is basically the prompt that you would type into the ChatGPT interface. So for ChatGPT, OpenAI have set their own system prompt, right? So this is very different for ChatGPT, but this part that actually works pretty much the same as if you would type it directly into ChatGPT. Now time to test it, so let's click on the plus button and the run button to run it. So it will first query Notion database, then it will query OpenAI, and then hopefully will give us a response back. And sometimes that takes a moment because OpenAI sometimes takes a few seconds to respond. But after that, we should be able to go down here. And yes, we see we got a proper response back. So in messages, we see now content, the summary. Scrinter is a knowledge management tool that combines blah, blah, blah. And then we have our 3 hashtags as a separator. And then we have the ID of the correct tag in there. So everything worked. If you get something else back, it's probably some sort of status code with 400, which indicates an error. And then usually they have an error message in there that's very precise and tells you where you went wrong exactly, right? Maybe you have somewhere something said wrong. Maybe you have a comma here instead of a dot, something like that, or one of these messages is missing. So go ahead, read it. And if you have any questions remaining, leave them in the comments below and I'm happy to help you with it. Next up, just like we did with Notion, we also here have to then extract from this JSON object that we get back from the API the actual information that we want. And we do that again by getting the value from the dictionary. So we drag another get dictionary value module to the end. And here the path is a bit simpler. So we will do choices.1.message.content. And again, you can copy paste it from the blog post. Otherwise, let's check whether this worked and we spelled everything correctly. And if we did, then we should now see at the very end just the summary, 3 hashtags, and then our ID. Yes, that looks good. And as you can see, again, like because we have a fairly generic prompt for the summary, we get a fairly generic summary here as well. But if we go more specific and say that specific things are more important to us, then we could modify it with that. But let's work with that now. And now what we will do is we will split this. So we have both the actual text and the ID as values to work with. First off, let's actually make this large so we have a bit more room to work with. I'll move myself here. And great. So first things first, we need to split it now, right? So we look for the split text option and we add it here. And then we want to not split it by new lines, but by a custom character, by 3 hashtags. And if we do this and run it now, we should get back a list that has the 2 values separated. So let's wait for a second for OpenAI to give us their response. And there we have it. Now we have the ID and the summary separated. Great. So the next step is then to now get these items from the list and add them to Notion. So to start the 3rd step in our project, let's go again to get contents of URL, add it to the bottom. And this time the URL that we add something to will be the other Notion URL. So it's the api.notion.com v1 pages. And in here, we again change the method to post and we set the same headers as before. So we go in here and we type authorization and the value for it is bearer space and then our API key. And then the second one is Notion version and it's 2022/06/28. But unlike in the first step where we just queried information from a page, this time we want to add some information to Notion, right? So we need to add these information to the request body as JSON. So to do so, we click here on the plus button and first we specify where we want to add something. So we add the parent, we switch this to a dictionary and then we open it up and say, okay, the ID, the database ID that we want to push it is, let me check, which one is it that we want to add something to? For me, it's this one. For you, you will have to now go back to Notion, open up the notes database, copy the link, and again, identify that string to get the ID for the database. And that's all we need to set here. Now Notion knows to which database it should add information. So next, it's time to specify the type of information. And for that, we add another top level entry here called properties. Now in properties, we will now have to create quite some nested objects to tell Notion exactly, okay, these properties have to be filled out. So if the next steps are a bit confusing, slow down the video, go back and rewatch it. But if you, again, just follow it step by step, you'll be sure to get there. So let's get started and open it up. And the first one that we want to add here is one for the title. Now we open this up, we click on plus, and then in here we call this name, right? And we have to call it exactly the way we've labeled the property in our Notion workspace. So to make sure, go back to your Notion and make sure that the property name exactly corresponds also with a capital letter to what you've written now down here in properties name. Then change this to a dictionary and open it up. And inside the name, we add now another title property. So this is a small title and it's an array. And this always corresponds to the database property, right? So in Notion, the first property is always a title property. This one would be a rich text and this one would be a relation. And our first nested element in here will always correspond to this type and it's written small. Then we open up title, we again click on plus, and inside this time, because it's an array, we can't set a name, but we can set the type again to dictionary. We open it up again and inside here create now a text, something called text. It's important that if you start typing, don't pick the variable, instead just write text like this. Turn it into dictionary, open it up one last time, and inside here type content. Again, don't take the URL, the variable, take it like this, text. And now finally in here we can actually add our content. So this one we can just call it test note for now as a placeholder, and this is the nested structure that we need for this property. Now we need to do this again for all the other properties. So I'll go through the next two a bit quicker. So again, I click on properties and inside here I create now the first level. This will be the transcript, capital because it's capital in my Notion. Open it up and inside transcript create a rich underscore text element, which is an array. And inside that array, we create another dictionary. And inside this dictionary, we create our text dictionary. And inside this text dictionary, we add our actual content. Now, this content is again a placeholder. This will be the transcript, right, from what you're talking to Siri. This is what we built in step 4. And now after transcript and name, we create the third one. And this will be the one for our summary. So I type summary, open it up, add an array inside. This array will be called, again, rich text, because that's the database. Add a property type, open it up, add a nested element, turn this into a dictionary. By now, you might have gotten the drill. Open up the item, call this text. Again, one last dictionary, open it, add the content. And now we do something a little bit different. Now we pull the information that we have here already, right? So here we split this into a list. So now we want to get that information from the list. So I type list and we say get item from list. And now I say I don't want the first, actually here in this case I want the first item, so that's fine, from split text. And if you had more, right, you could also go in there and say item at index, that would work as well. But because we only have 2, we can get first and last. And then I say, okay, the content should be this variable. So I go in here, right click, insert variable, select variable, and then we take this item from the list. And now if we run this, hopefully in Notion, it should create an entry here with all these values. So let's check, let's click on run and hope for the best. Okay, let's go to Notion. And there we have a test node placeholder and our summary from OpenAI. So everything works now. The last thing here in step 3 to do is to make sure that we actually tag it also with the correct tag, which at this point will be a breeze. So let's open up Notion Pages, go to our properties and add our fourth property. This one will be our tag, and we open it up. And this time it's a different type. This time it's a relation. So the relation array will have one child inside and it's a dictionary. So it's the same structure until here. And now inside we only need one level down. So here we can immediately add the ID, and we need to get the ID first. So we say get item from list. And in this case, we want to get the last item from the list, but not from list here, but from the split text. So we say select variable and we choose the split text. Okay, and then we can go in here in the value, again, right click here, insert a variable and pick this second element from the list. Great, and now we can run it again, and this time it should create a placeholder one with a tag. So I click again on plus and wait a second, and then go to Notion. And here we have a test node placeholder, and it has been tagged correctly with productivity, right? OpenAI identified that this is about productivity and correctly assigned this tag. Awesome. So with this, step 3 is complete. We have now the complete basic setup where we take our tag system from Notion, we run it together with a prompt through OpenAI to summarize something, and then add everything to Notion. So the last thing now to build in step 4 is to make sure that we actually can speak and input into our shortcut, so it's not a hard-coded summary that it always gives us back. Luckily, this 4th step isn't really complicated. Again, the only reason we build it like this is because it's easier to debug if you run into any issues. So now what we need to do is at the very top, we now will get an input. So we search for ask for input, and we add this at the very top. And because we have a name and a transcript, we add this twice, but if you don't want to give your notes names, you don't need to do it twice, and you can skip the naming part. But in this case, I will ask for text with the prompt, what is your note about? And then I will add a second ask for input below. And this one will be, what's the note? Great. Now we have these two inputs. Now we just need to reference them here, right? So in text, we need to make sure that where we currently have this hard-coded screen tile information, we remove this. And then in between the quotation marks, we say insert variable, select variable, and we take the provided input from the actual note. And then in the lower part here, where we have our properties and we have our name, here we also remove the hard-coded test node, and instead we say, okay, instead of test node, this will be our initial input, the provided input. And for the second thing, for the transcript, we also remove the placeholder text and instead take our input. Right click, insert variable, select variable, and take the provided input. Awesome, so now that's really the whole setup. Again, step 4, very short, but now you can test it. On your Mac, it won't ask for it, right? If you use this now with Siri on your phone, it will actually, Siri will start asking you for things. Here, just a window will pop up for you to input something. So I click on play, and I will get this context window. So what is your note about? Final test. And then it will ask me about the content. And again, I will just grab the same one as we had before, put that in to make it a bit quicker, wait for things to run, check Notion, and there we have it. Final test, we have our transcript, we have our summary, and we have the correct tag. With that, you have built yourself an AI-powered note-taking tool right into Notion. Now you know how to revolutionize your note-taking system with AI. But why stop there? Why not find a system that allows you to never take any meeting notes ever again? Sounds cool? That's because it is. Here's a step-by-step walkthrough of how you can achieve it.